Hey, what's up everyone? A couple of years ago I built the shelf layout behind me for one very specific purpose, and that was to use it as a testing ground for writing some operations software that I'm going to be using for both my current layouts and all my future layouts going forward for all the operating sessions. So in this video, I'm going to show you what I came up with. Yeah, one more thing. Before we get into this video, I just want to put a disclaimer out there. The target audience for this software is myself. It's a personal project that I'm going to be using for all of my layouts going forward, and it's written and operates in such a way that I want to operate my layouts. So I just want to put that out there as a heads up. At some point, if there's enough interest, I can make it publicly available. However, with the caveat that it will be provided as is, meaning I'm not going to entertain a bunch of feature requests. I'm not going to do this or that or cater to anyone else's workflow. This is simply a personal project that I've been working on for the past couple of years that I've shared with a couple of friends a little bit here and there. However, I don't have the time to actually make this a commercial product to be able to cater to anyone else's request. It's a personal project that eventually, if there's enough interest, I'll make publicly available as a free download. However, that's it. I'll provide instructions on how to use it, how to set it up, and how it operates, and you can watch this video or any future videos that I have and how all that works. However, you get what you pay for. It's a free option. If it works for you, that's great. If it doesn't, there's plenty of other options out there, or you can write your own. So just want to put that out there before we get into the video, because I know there's going to be a bunch of comments in the comments section saying, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Refer back to this part of the video and just know that it's my own personal project. I'm simply sharing it. So with that, let's get started. Alright, so let's talk about this software that I've created here. So I'm calling it Late Night Operations. You can see this logo I came up with it here. But what is Late Night Operations? So it's software for managing railcar movements in model railroad operating sessions, which I'm sure you've probably surmised given the channel here. It's also based on Car Cards and Waybills, which is my favorite way of operating layouts. Now I've done a bunch of research on all the different methods that are out there, and I've come to the conclusion that for me personally, I enjoy the Car Cards and Waybills method the most, and so that's what this is based on. I do say there's a hint of switch list in there, but only a hint, and we'll get into that later. So this is a personal project, and it's on its third iteration. So over the past couple years, I've been working on this, and I've gone through a bunch of trials and errors, and started over a couple times, and on my third iteration of it right now. So I'll go over some of the requirements that I had for writing this software. This is just for me personally. So it needs to digitally replace physical car cards and waybills. I like the concept. I really enjoy it. I just don't like all the paper and the cutting and all the stuff kind of strewn across the layout. I don't really like bill boxes hanging off the side of my layout. It's not really something I want to have. And so since I'm a software developer during the day, I decided, well, I'll just write my own software and I'll just create a digital version of Car Cards and Waybills the way I want to be able to use them to run my layout. So this is designed to run on a local area network without an internet connection. So that was a requirement for me because I didn't want to have any hosting costs. So the original concept of this software is just for me to run for my own layouts. I wasn't planning on sharing it at first, so I wanted to make sure I didn't have to pay just to use it for my own layouts. So I wanted to run it locally. I didn't want to have to pay for any hosting or anything like that. So it also needs to support data sharing and real-time updates with other devices on the network, meaning I would run it on my computer, and then I would have a bunch of tablets kind of situated around the layout, and each one of those tablets will be able to connect to it and share real-time data back and forth. So if someone makes a change on a tablet on the opposite side of the layout, every other tablet and the computer itself will see that change in real time, and so there's no need to refresh the screen or anything like that. All tablets will display the latest data at all times. It also needed to be easy to set up and simple to use. I really like simple, and so that's what I was striving for. Now there is quite a bit of a configuration that can happen. Not all of it's necessary, but it has the ability to really configure a bunch of different aspects to it. But in the end, it's actually pretty easy to use and pretty simple as far as the operations go. Big one for me was be able to import railcar data. So I have a spreadsheet of all my models, and I wanted to be able to import that into the software so I don't have to type that in manually for every single railcar. So I have the ability to do that, and that was kind of a big one for me. And it also needed to increase enjoyment by supporting my preferred style of operations. There's other software that's out there. Some of it you have to pay for, some of it's free, but none of them really did the thing I wanted to do. And so I wrote this in such a way that it would bring more enjoyment when I was operating my own layouts. So some of the features that I considered important for me, I'll go over next. Railcars, locomotives, and waybills can be cloned for fast data entry, especially for waybills. So I didn't want to have to write the same waybill over and over and over for a whole bunch of different railcars. So I have developed a way that I can insert one or many waybills for a single railcar, be able to clone that across any number of railcars, even the same railcar, as many times as I want. Unlimited waybills per railcar was also a big thing for me. I didn't want to be limited by like a 2-cycle waybill or a 4-cycle or 6 or whatever. I wanted to be able to input as many different waybills for any railcar as I wanted, depending on the type of depending on the type of operations I wanted to do and how soon I wanted those railcars to make it back onto the layout, etc. Defect reporting for railcars, locomotives, and just general layout issues. So if someone spots an issue with a railcar, for example, they can create a defect report. I'll get that at the end of the session, and then I can go ahead and I can try to resolve that. I also implemented bulletins and some other dialogues for communicating rules, procedures, any other data like special instructions for particular locations or a particular train, or just general rules and for the layout in general. Like don't put food and drink on the top of my layout. It's something I can have immediate access for operators to look at so that they don't have to wonder. They can just go to one spot and they can figure out what the rules are. Waybill completion statuses, meaning whenever it tracks, basically what it does is it tracks all the movements on the layout, and then it determines which waybills are complete, which ones are not, which ones are in kind of a pending status, so I can see at a glance which ones have already been done for the operating session and which ones still need to be worked on. Dedicated train routes and jobs, so what I can do is say, okay, this particular train is responsible for taking rail cars from this yard to an interchange track, and then from that track back to the yard. And that's the whole duty of that particular job, and I have a way to basically designate that per train. Operating session data is tracked, so I can look at all of my data from a previous operating session and say, okay, well, it looks like it took this long. It looks like we were able to get maybe 50 out of 60 waybills completed for that session. And that's just kind of a way for me to look back and say, okay, do I need to lengthen the time of the session to be able to get as much work done? Or are the sessions taking too long for the amount of work that needs to be completed, etc.? It's just something for me to go back on and kind of change up the way maybe I want to style my operating sessions. Operators should have everything they need in one view. You shouldn't have to be able to click to other screens to be able to get the data you need, especially when you're operating. So for example, if you're at a yard and you're looking at all the rail cars that need to be moved in that yard and what trains they would need to be assigned to and things like that, you don't have to click through a bunch of different screens to get there. Everything you need, including being able to report defects, update waybills, maybe to the next waybill that needs to be completed, things like that, all can be done in one screen for the operator, so you don't have to jump through multiple screens. And all the data can be imported or exported whenever I want. Okay, so let's start talking about this software. So for this first part of the video, I'm just going to give a brief overview of each section of the software, and then later on, I'll actually demonstrate how I use it alongside one of my switching layouts, and I'll go into more details then. Okay, so when you first launch the software, this is the screen you're going to see. And there's basically two main sections of the software. There's the back end and the front end is what I call it. So the back end is like the admin portion, and the front end I would label as the operator view. So this particular screen, there's also, if you look at the top, there's also a menu. And it's just a basic application menu. So you've got like the About section, various things you can perform over here. I can refresh all client data, so all the tablets that are connected to this particular instance of the running software, I can refresh all their data externally, and that'll refresh the screens if I need to. This is the server address of where this is running on the local area network. So I would go into each of the tablets, into a browser address bar, type this in, and that'll get me access to this particular operating session that's going to happen. So there's no need for logging in, there's no need for user accounts or anything like that. You'd simply type in this address bar and then you're there. The caveat though is it's on your own local area network. You can't access it outside of there. So you have to be able to allow these devices to be on your network. That's why I'm providing tablets. I'm not just going to let anyone onto my private local area network. It's up to you if you want to do that, but just, that's the caveat there. You can also quit the application. There's some basic edit menus, so when you're typing in forms and everything, you can copy and paste. Basic view menu for reloading the screen, toggling full screen, etc. You can also view an error log if something's occurring and you're seeing an error. You can let me know. Or while I'm developing, I was using this to let myself know that I was experiencing an error, and I could just debug that and fix it. Okay, so now let's start talking about the admin portion of the application. So when you go to here, you'll see a couple of different things at the top. The late night operations, this is actually shows the connection to the server. This is the server, so it's connected at all times, but this is what would show on the top of the menus on all the tablets, for example, on what your connection status is. I can click this and I can go back to the main menu as well. And then there are two main sections of the admin view. There's the manage section, which lets you manage, like right here, the layout entities and settings. You can also import and export in this section. And there's also the session section, and this lets you manage the operating session data. So like waybills, car locations, train assignments, like routing and jobs will be here. And each one of these sections has like a card that explains what it is. And on each section, there's also a menu on the left, which takes you to that particular portion of the admin. And each of these cards also does as well. So each one of these is actually like a link or a button that takes you to that section. Okay, so I'm going to go through briefly on each one of these sections here. We'll start with the layout. And the layout, this particular view is mostly for rearranging how the operators are going to view the various parts of your layout. So there are sections and locations, which I'll get into, and this lets you kind of configure how those are displayed in the operator's view. You can also give your layout a name, and these are kind of drag and drop, so you can kind of rearrange them however you want. Sections are basically, think of it like different areas of your layout, or they could be like one particular place on the layout. So for example, a yard, a staging yard, or they could represent a town or like an industrial center, places where you'll have different industries and other things going on. So these are just kind of like blocks of your layout, and you can give them different names. They can also act as a location, which I'll get into later when we start talking about like train assignments and things like that. You can edit them, delete them, give them colors. Everything that has a color, you can actually give it two colors, so you can designate all your different color options when you're looking at it. So certain sections will have a particular color, certain locations and rail cars will have their particular colors. You can identify them really quickly. Locations are basically anywhere that you can place rail cars, essentially. I mean, you could designate a location to have no rail cars if you wanted to, but the way I use it, a location typically represents a track. You can see down here I have a bunch of different locations. I can sort these as well. So I have this Kinnear C1 through C3, those are classification tracks. Kinnear 80, that's my arrival departure track in my Kinnear yard. This one represents Grain Express, which is an industry. You can see it has max capacity of 3 rail cars for that particular location, and so on and so forth. Each one has a color option. You can also designate if you want specific types of rail cars that are only allowed, so maybe The Grain Express, for example, this one only allows covered hoppers. I can change the names and everything like that. I can give them some notes that will be displayed in the UI. Any special instructions for this particular location, I can have that here. If I set the max capacity to 0, then you can have as many rail cars at that location as you want. Railcars seems pretty obvious, but these represent the model railcars that you're going to have on your layout. You can give them reporting marks, road number. You can change their display name. So I'm just going to type one in real quick. Let's just say I have a Burlington Northern boxcar. I can type in a name, or I can click this icon here, and that'll combine the reporting mark with the road number. If you don't give it a display name, that will be the default. I can designate which type of rail car it is. These are all based on the AAR car codes. So I can click this if I wanted to. I can give it some notes if I needed, and I can give it a color. So colors, you can see there's a kind of a palette here I can choose from. If this is a brown box car or something close to it, I can choose that. Or if it's a multicolor rail car, I can do that as well. I can also use this little icon here, click this, and I can choose a color anywhere on the page. So if I wanted to mimic another color, I could do that. I can click one of these two options here to duplicate the color across both of them. So I can see a hover here and it says use color 1 for both. So I can do that, it'll populate it. So if there's only one color, you can quickly get through that. I can save this. Oh, also, I can set this rail car as active or inactive. Basically what it means is if it's active, it'll be included in any calculations that occur in the operator's view, and also during the operating session and when you decide to end the operating session and process any waybills, those will be included. If I set this to inactive, it's basically just, think of it like it's somewhere on your shelf, basically. So it may not be on the layout, you may just have it in here, you may bring it in later, or it may have a defect and you want to take it off the layout, fix it, and bring it back later. I can save this, and that'll save it to my list of railcars. I can also save and clone, which provides for a faster way of entering similar railcars. Let's say I have 2 of these railcars, they're just off by 1 number. I can click save and clone. It'll clear out the road number, so maybe it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 6. I could do that, save it. If I go down here, I can see both railcars are there. They have all the same configuration. I can delete these. It'll confirm if I want to actually delete those. I can also clone them right from here. So for example, let's say I went out and I bought another one of these covered hoppers. And it's a different road number, obviously it would be for me. I can hit clone, and then I've got all this information up here. I can type in the numbers and then save it. And that's just a quick way to get railcars into your application. Can also import those, which I'll talk about later as well. I'll reset this form. And locomotives, they're really just here for information purposes. They don't really serve any other purpose other than to let your operators know which locomotives they may want assigned to a specific train. So you know, okay, I need to do the local job for the industrial sector. So which locomotives am I going to use? I can assign those locomotives to that train, and they can quickly see, oh, I need to use this one here or this pair of locomotives here. And so same thing, you can save it, save and clone. You have all the same options except for model is different here. So you can designate a model. So that will display in parts of the UI, so you can quickly determine what type of locomotive that is. There's a few options here, diesel, steam, electric, whatever you want there. And those are basically locomotives. We'll get into how we interact with those later when we get into the operator view. Trains are basically, think of this as, yes, they're trains and you can designate jobs to those trains. They're primarily used for, like, so when you're using car cards and waybills, you're carrying a stack of car cards with you. That's your train. This is basically acts like that. So it's a place to put the quote-unquote car cards. So as you're moving around the layout, they follow along with you. You can also give them duties, which we'll get into later. You can assign colors, display names. You can have a max capacity. So maybe this train only can carry 4 cars for some reason. I have that actually on my layout. There's a very specific job. You can only carry 4 cars at a time because its destination only allows for 4 rail cars to be there. And so that's the way I have it set up. It's actually this one, the CN turn. You can configure this however you want there. You can edit, delete, all the same things. Defects, I don't have any defects listed here, but we'll get into that later. So if an operator comes across, hey, this railcar has a broken coupler on it, they can create a defect report. That'll show up here so I know which car it is, and I can go ahead and resolve that and get it back onto the layout as soon as I can. Bulletins are a way to give quick information to the operators. You can have as many bulletins as you want. One could be dedicated just to rules. One could be dedicated to how you get your controllers. I just put a whole bunch of stuff into one bulletin for now, but I plan on having extra ones as well. They will be saved by time, and they will be sorted by time in the UI, so you can go ahead and kind of look at a historical collection of bulletins. Maybe you want to have a bulletin for a very specific operating session. You can do that, and that just allows information to get to the users as quickly as possible. So you don't have to keep reiterating that information over and over. They can get back to the information whenever they need to. Settings, there's just a few settings in here. This will probably grow over time. Just different various things that can happen in the UI. You can search for railcars. I'll get into that later, but you can designate how many search results you want to see. And importing and exporting. I'll get into this much later, but this is just a way to import railcars, which was very important to me. I have an extensive list of rolling stock that I didn't want to type in by hand, and so I just created a way to be able to import that. I can also export that as well. I can import an entire database. I can export the entire database kind of as a backup, and I can also reset it. Okay, let's start talking about the session section of the admin view, and we'll start with waybills. So for waybills, you need to have active railcars to be able to assign waybills to them. And all the active railcars will be on the left-hand side. This is actually a scrollable thing. I don't have a lot entered for this particular layout, but if there were more, you'd be able to scroll through them. You can also search for them by reporting mark or by type. So if I want to look for like covered hoppers, I could do that. All I have to do is click on one of them, and that will bring up all the waybills for that particular railcar. You see I already have a bunch of these assigned for this particular railcar. And so the way this screen works is every operating session you'll have an active waybill. The active waybill is always the farthest to the left, so it's basically the first one in the list. As operating sessions are completed, as long as that waybill has gotten to the location it needed to, meaning in this particular operating session, as long as this railcar makes it to the destination of Grain Express, this will be considered complete, and then it'll move on to the very next waybill. So it'll basically take this waybill here and move it to the end of the list. You can also move these around by drag and drop. So if you need to reorder them before a session starts, you can do that. You can also cycle them as well to the right or to the left if I want to cycle them. So I want to make sure that my active waybill is the one that, for that particular session. Just make sure that's always on the left. And you can fill these out like any other form. You can clone them. You can also select all waybills and clone those to any other railcar that you'd like. So if you have a bunch of railcars that have basically the same operating scheme, basically the same waybills, you can clone those over. You can overwrite existing waybills and other railcars and things like that. I'll clear the selection here. And I guess what I'll do is I'll create really quick to show you. I'll go back to manage, go to railcars. Maybe I'll clone one of these guys here. I'll give it a number that's easy to spot in the UI. And you can see it down here. So let's say that this is a brand new railcar. I want to create a bunch of cycles for this thing to go through. So I can add a waybill here. I can give it a name. Maybe I want to transfer this to the interchange. I'll select the destination, select the interchange track, the task. What do I want it to do during this session? I want it to relocate. I can have it wait, load, or unload. There's just some basic tasks to enter in. I can add a lading before it's completed. So let's say this one's empty. After it's completed, it'll still remain empty. If I was having it go to an industry to get loaded, I would just type in whatever it got loaded with at the end of that task. I can also give it a timer, which I'll show a little bit later on once we get into how I operate with it. But basically, you can designate in seconds how long that task is going to take once it arrives at the destination. and I'll show you that a little later. You can add a note if you need to, and then you can just save it. Now, let's say I want to do the exact same thing, but all I want to do is change up where it's going to. I can say clone, create another one of these, but I want to transfer it back to my Kinnear yard. It's still empty. Boom, done. I just created 2 cycle waybills. And I can keep doing this as well. Or what I can do is I can say, hey, I want it to follow the same route as this particular rail car. I can select all waybills, hit clone, find my rail car, and I want it to overwrite the existing rail cars, overwrite the existing waybills that I just entered on there. I want to have this exact same layout. I'll hit clone. I'll go down to here, and you can see they're exactly the same. Maybe I want it to be the same, but I want it to be, maybe a couple different cycles off. So I can say, okay, I'll move it over a couple different cycles. Now you notice up here at the top where it says, this doesn't have a location set. This one does. This one is currently at Grain Express. Maybe I want this one to be at, since this is my active waybill, that means that this is where it was last, because that's the end of the list. So when this was completed, this was the active waybill, and then once that session completed, it's moved over here. So actually, this railcar should be at this location. So if I click move here, you can see it sets the current location of that railcar to whatever this destination was in the previous session. So when I'm looking at my layout, I can confirm that. Now, obviously, this is just a made-up railcar, so it won't exist on my layout. But if it was, I could do that. I can also click move here on any one of these, and it'll move that railcar to that location in the UI. So wherever you want it to be, you can move it around that way as well. It's just a quick way to get railcars into the UI for the operators. So I'm going to stop there for the waybills. We'll get into a little bit more of this with the timers a little bit later. We'll move on to the next section. Actually, before I do that, there's just one more thing I want to highlight with these. Let's say you made a mistake on one of these waybills and you want to get rid of it. It's pretty easy. Just click the X. That gets rid of it. You can also select all. And while they're all selected and click the X, that'll delete all of them. Okay, let's talk about railcar locations next. This is basically a way to quickly get your railcars from no location to some sort of location in the UI. So like when you're originally setting this thing up, if you're not going to set them up via the waybills location, you can also do it this way. Or if you just need to grab a bunch of them and move them from one location to the other without having to go through the operator's view, you can do that as well. So on the left-hand side, we can see we can select either location or a specific train. If I select location, I can set no location set. These are all the rail cars that don't yet have any sort of location set to them, and I can select a location to put them. So if there's nothing on this track, let's see, there's a couple on this one here. I can move them around. I can simply select the ones I want, click the arrow, and it'll move it over to that section. Or I can move it back as well. So I can set it from some sort of location or train to no location at all, or from train to train or location to location. So if I want to do this all in the quote-unquote back end, I can do that. This will at least get it onto the layout somewhere. It will not show any rail cars in the operator's view unless it's set to some sort of location or train. So this is one way to get it on there. The other way, as I had mentioned before, is to simply click the Move Here button on one of the waybills, and that will set the location as well. Okay, we're going to talk about train assignments next. So what I'm going to do is just click on one of these here. This is my Kinnear switcher. This is just basically works the yard. There's no specific location assignment set for this. It's just whatever's in the yard that needs to get moved around. That's essentially what this job does. And right now I have it set to this particular locomotive. If I wanted to assign specific carved movements that this train would be responsible for, or at least available to accommodate, I could do it one of the two ways. I can set this general service location assignment setting, which basically allows me to select a bunch of different locations. Let's say I chose this one, and let's say I chose these three. So as long as there is a rail car for the particular operating session that has a destination of one of these locations, this train would be available to provide that movement. That's essentially the way that works. I'm going to clear these. The other way to do that is by adding more of a targeted, I'd call it targeted service location. It's a way to granularly set this. So I could say instead of any rail car that has this particular destination, I could set a very specific routing. So for example, if I go to my CN turn, this train is responsible for taking rail cars that are at this Kinnear arrival departure track to the interchange track, and from the interchange track back to that arrival departure track. That's the sole purpose for that train's job for that particular operating session. So I can add additional ones if I wanted to. I could say, well, I actually want this to go from here to, I don't know, here. Right? I can do that. And as long as there is a rail car that is at this location, that has a destination for its waybill for this location, this train could be basically responsible for moving that around. It doesn't have to, depending on how busy the operating sessions get. And I'll show how this actually affects the UI a little bit later. Just want to touch on it real quick. I'm not going to get too in-depth with this right away. If there's enough interest in this, I can go into more of an in-depth explanation of this. But that's kind of the basics. I can also delete these if I wanted to clear them out. If I take a look at this one here, you can see there's a bunch of different location car movements that this particular train could be responsible for fulfilling. So going from Kinnear to the Grain Express, or Grain Express back to Kinnear, etc., etc. So again, I'll show that a little bit later, kind of briefly, and if there's enough interest, I can go into another kind of explanation of that later on. Okay, let's talk about operating sessions really quick. So this is just basically a way to start and end your operating session. Once you are done, it'll actually record all the data here. As you can see, this operating session lasted for 1 hour and 12 minutes, and 14 out of 15 tasks were completed. So basically that means that 14 of the 15 active waybills reached their destination during that session. Now I can come back and say, oh, if I had just another 10, 15 minutes, we could have completed all 15 tasks. Or maybe the session only lasted, 30 minutes and all 15 were completed. That tells me as layout owner, it says, well, we completed everything in a half an hour. I want to drag this out a little bit longer. Maybe I'll introduce different types of operations, different car movements, different elements and aspects of the operating session to kind of slow things down so they can kind of enjoy it for a longer period of time. So it's basically metadata for me to look back on and say, hey, is the amount of tasks being completed happening within a reasonable amount of time? Am I enjoying myself with this? Am I rushing too much? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? So that's basically a way to do that. So when you end an operating session, you'll have the option to process all the waybills at that point in time, meaning it'll take any active waybill that has reached its destination, it'll mark it as complete, and during the next session, it'll basically take that waybill and move it to the end of the waybill list for that particular rail car. So it just cycles it one cycle. So it's kind of like flipping the waybill card over or flipping it to the back side or whatever it happens to be in the paper form. That's essentially what it's doing here. If I don't do it right away, I can do that later by clicking Process All Waybills, and that'll move all waybills forward that have been completed. Okay, so let's start talking about the operator view. So in a moment, I'm just going to have a brief overview of what the operator's view looks like and some of the options that are there. And later in the video, I'll actually show me using the operator view in conjunction with actually switching some cars around my layout so you get an idea of how I use it side by side. So for now, we're just going to click the operator button here. And here's the operator view. I'll briefly go through what's here. At the top, this is basically just a way to get back to the main screen. It'll also show the sessions, the connection status with the server. You can see it's green, so I'm connected. I have a bulletins button. So this is where I can show all my bulletins to my operators. They can go through these. Whatever information I need to disseminate to them, I can do that through here. In the middle, there's kind of a status of what the operating session is at right now. You can see currently the last session has ended, and it's not yet started into a new one yet. There's a search bar, so I can search for Railcars within the screen. I'll show you that a little later. There's a menu with some other options, so I can report a defect, enter full screen mode. That's useful for tablets and other mobile devices, and along with some other options here that I'll get into a little bit later. And then the admin button will take me back to the admin view directly. So up top is our current train. Right now there's nothing selected, so I will actually select one of those. Let's just say this one. And this will show me everything related to my train. If I have any car cards and waybills associated with that, they will show in this bar here. I'll get into that in just a moment. Any locomotives that I have assigned to this train will be displayed here. I can take a look at that closer by going to this menu button and choosing Manage, or I can double click it. That will show me all the locomotives that are assigned and any unassigned locomotives that I may want to assign to this train as well. We can get into that a little later. And just some general information that I want to relay about this particular locomotive, or if I need to report a defect on it. Next up down here are my sections. So sections are kind of chunks of the layout that have locations in them. Locations are places where you put car cards and waybills, places where you actually have tracks that hold rail cars on the layout. So I'm just going to select Kinnear Yard. So here's my Kinnear Yard section. You can see it's labeled up here. I can actually learn more about it by just clicking the name, and that'll show me a little pop-up box with any special information I may want operators to know about that section. I can also do that for the locations as well. You can see I have all the locations that are assigned to this particular section of the layout. So naturally a yard would have a bunch of classification tracks. I have a arrival departure track down here. And you can get more information about those by clicking on them. Not much on this one, but I can show you some other examples a little bit later. And inside each location, you can see all the various kind of car cards and waybills for those locations. So you can think of each location as a bill box, and this is where you would put your car cards and waybills. A train you can think of as simply the car cards and waybills that are in your hand, that you're walking around the layout with, and you can move them back and forth. So if you remember back to the requirements that I had for writing the software, is that I needed to basically create a digital version of car cards and waybills. So if you think about car cards and waybills, they're just slips of paper that you place in various portions of the layout or walk around carrying in your hand. Well, the train would be akin to carrying those around in your hand, and all these locations are simply bill boxes. So if I want to move them physically, if I had paper, I would simply set them down, wherever they needed to go. In this one, this is showing me which car cards and waybills are set down in that particular bill box. If I need to move them around, I can simply click on one to select it, or click on multiple to select them, or deselect them. I can select all by clicking the Select All button. And you'll notice that on the screen, a bunch of these Move Here buttons showed up. This is just letting me move those quote-unquote pieces of paper to wherever I want them to go. So now that I have all these selected, I can move them to my train. This is akin to me picking them up and holding them in my hand, and now I can walk around the layout with them. Once I get to my designated destination, I can select them, one or many or all, and then click where I want them to go. This is the digital version, one-to-one, of moving paper around the layout. It's as simple as that. I actually didn't need to do anything else beyond that. I would have completed my requirements for that particular requirement just by doing that. But of course, there's a lot of other niceties that I baked into this as well, and we'll go over each one of those as we go. The other thing that is really nice with physical car cards and waybills is you can sort them. You can hold them in your hand the same way that the cars are attached to your train, or put them in a bill box in the same way that they're actually sitting on the track. We could do that as well here. So you can see this is a particular order that they're in right here, but I can change that. I can simply click and drag, and I can rearrange the order of those car cards and waybills. So however they appear on the track in front of me or in the train in front of me, I can move them around so that they're a one-to-one match to what I'm looking at on my actual layout. So that's makes it simple that way. I can move them from kind of bill box to bill box, so to speak, by just clicking one and moving it to another one. You could see that there's arrows next to these move buttons. This is just a quick way to move it to the left or the right of the existing cars that are there. So if I move this onto this track and it happens to be, I moved it onto the left side, I can move it there. You can see now it's on the left. Maybe I move it back here, I moved it to the right, and maybe I switch this track around and it ends up being over here. I can move that around as well. So that's how you basically move car cards and waybills around the layout. And we'll get into some other stuff in just a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my layout, make sure that it looks exactly like it does here, and I'll show you how I use it one for one with the actual switching moves that I do. And we'll go into more details of this particular UI as we work the train down the layout. Before we get into this, let's just get familiar with the layout. On the west end over here, we see we have Kinnear Yard. And on the east end, we have this Industrial Sector E, which is all the rest of the industries that get switched out on the layout. There's also an interchange track down here. And there's also this spot over here called CN off layout. Cars will go on and off the layout through the interchange, get placed over here, and then come back and then work their way through the layout again. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to compare where the rail cars are on the layout right now versus what it says inside the software. I'm just going to reconcile those two before I start my operating session. So if we start at Kinnear Yard here, if we look at the very back track, which is classification track number 3, in the software I have listed, I have a covered hopper here, CCLX, it's a gray hopper, and I see that over there, so that looks good. Coming down to classification track 2, there's an ATSF boxcar and a West Falls Northern covered hopper, which I do see. On Kinnear classification track 1, I see I have 2 boxcars and 2 covered hoppers. Now, these are in the right order as they appear in the software. However, they're not on the correct track as opposed to where the software says they are. So whenever I finished this last operating session, I probably left them on the arrival departure track. And when I was kind of demonstrating some of the features of the software, I probably moved them to the wrong track. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and select all of these cars, and I'm going to move them to where it says they are, or where they actually are on the layout. So that Kinnear Yard is now set up and ready to go. I've double checked everything, and we can move on to the next section. Okay, so I'm going to come up over here to my drop down for my sections. I'm going to go to Industrial Sector E. And we're going to start with Grain Express. I see on the layout I have 2 covered hoppers here, and in my software it says I have 2 covered hoppers, and the order of the road numbers are matching what's on the layout. So it looks like Grain Express is good, and we're going to jump over to the other side of Industrial Sector E. Okay, so we're looking at the other side of Industrial Sector E here, so let's go down through our tracks. We'll start with Goods Inc. On the working track, I see I have 2 box cars, and those 2 match up to what's on the layout. Looking at Goods Inc. Storage, I also have 2 box cars here, and those are also in the correct order as they appear in the layout. And then down on the interchange track, I have a covered hopper, which is exactly what the layout is showing me as well. So with the interchange track, the way I work it is every rail car will come on and off the layout through this interchange track, and they'll spend at least 1 operating session off layout. So what I have here inside my notes, or my special instructions for this particular location, and also for the CN off layout location, is this message right here. So before the start of each operating session, I'm going to double check the rail cars on this track to determine if they should be there or in the off layout area or not. So rail cars that should be on this track for the current operating session, or the upcoming operating session, should have their current waybill destination set to something other than off layout. And rail cars that should be in off layout should have their current waybill destination set to off layout. Basically, the way I set this up is they're going to spend at least 1 operating session off layout before they come back on again and make their way through the entire layout. So if we look at the destination for the upcoming operating session, that's going to be set to off layout. Now if I go back to here and I say, okay, rail cars that should be in off layout should have their current waybill destination set to off layout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, select it, I'm going to move it to off layout, and on the actual layout, I'm going to move that rail car over to the CN off layout area, and that actually is complete for this session. So I won't have to touch that. You can see right here it does show that it is complete. And then in the next session after that, it'll make its way back onto the layout and work its way through again. So as it stands right here, everything that needs to be in its starting position for the upcoming operating session is exactly where it needs to be. And now I'm ready to start my session. On my server here, I'm going to go to my session section in the admin, go over to operating sessions, and I'm simply going to click start operating session. You can see down here it creates a new entry, says session in progress. Now we can head back over to our tablets and start running some trains. Okay, so back over on the tablet, I'm going to take a look at my top bar here, and it shows my status, which is operating session is in progress, which is great. So now we can start picking a job and moving some rail cars around. So what I'm going to do is going to head over to my train section here. I'm going to choose the CN turn for this demonstration. And just as a quick review of this section here, we can see the name of the train. If I click on it, I can see some information about that train. This one takes cars from Kinnear Yard over to the interchange track and back, and that's the sole purpose of this train. I can take a look at the locomotives. So this is the current locomotive assigned to this train. So if it's not the one I wanted to use, or it's not the one I was instructed to use, I can come in here, I could remove it and add the one that was assigned to me. But in this case, there's only a couple locomotives on this layout, so we're going to use the one that's here. And then this is where my car cards and waybills will show up once I have them selected and assigned to my train. And now we can start looking at what's in the yard. And because right now we're at Kinnear Yard, so we're in the correct location. And I can see what rail cars I would be responsible for. So there's a couple ways to do this. One, I can simply look at the destination on all the waybills. So I can see this one is destined for the CN interchange. I could definitely work that car. These ones are not going to the interchange, so I'm not going to touch those. And these 4 here on the arrival departure track are set to go to the interchange. Now, there's another way we could do this, and that's, I said I would mention this a little bit later, and now is the time, and that is this train assignments feature that I had implemented. So when I said there was a hint of switch list, this is kind of where this comes into play. So if I click this, it shows me all the information about the railcar movements that this particular train could be responsible for. So up at the top, it just gives me the same notes that I can view when I click on the name. And down here, it shows me basically a list of all the rail cars that have a destination that pertains to one of the locations that this train is responsible for servicing. So we can see all of the rail cars that are destined for the interchange track. Now, if there were cars on the interchange track that were destined for Kinnear Yard, they would also show up in here. But since there are not, this is what we've got to work with. So all rail cars that were in my train would show up here, and anything that's in a section in a location will show up in those respective places as well. So how do I know how many rail cars I can take to that particular destination? There's a couple ways to do that as well. I'm going to click out of here. I can actually go right to Industrial Sector E, which is where that track is located, and I can say, okay, how many rail cars can I fit on that track? And it says the available spots are 4 of 4. So there's 4 spots available, and then none are being taken up right now. So I know I can fit 4 rail cars there. The other way to do it is if I go back to train assignments, this switch here will let me see all the available locations that this train is responsible for servicing. By default, it's only going to show the locations where there are rail cars currently located that have, that I would be able to service. If I click this switch, it'll show me all locations regardless if there's rail cars there or not. And I can see down here, Industrial Sector E, the CN interchange is one of the locations I service for this train, and it shows me right here how many spots are available. I know there's 4 spots available, so I can come up to I'm just going to click this off for now. Now I have a decision to make. Which rail car should I take? Now, I don't have to move all of them in an operating session. I don't make that a requirement for my sessions. However, I do want to make sure that I move as many as possible for the given given job. So in this case, I can only move 4 to that track during this session, and since there's 4 on this track right here, I may as well pick those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire up my locomotive, move over to the train where the rail cars are, hook onto them, and then I'll come back here and I'll update my screen. Okay, so now that I've hooked onto my train, what I'm going to do is come back over to the software here on the tablet, and I'm at Kinnear Yard. I'm going to scroll down till I find the arrival departure track. I'm going to find all the cars that I'm going to be taking with me. I'm going to select all of them since I'm taking everyone off this track, and now I can move those to my train, or in essence, pick up those car cards and waybills and bring them into my hand so they can follow with me along the layout. So I'm just going to click Move to Train up here. If I come to the top, you can see all these rail cars are now assigned to my train, and now I can head out onto the main. Okay, so now that our train is heading down the tracks to its destination, I'm going to come back here to the UI and just talk about a couple other things now that they're in this portion of the application. And I'm going to start with something that's related to train assignments in a way. Now, train assignments will show you all the railcar movements that a particular train could be responsible for that particular session. But let's say you wanted to see all the railcar movements and where they're supposed to go for a given session. You can do that as well. Now, you could just kind of peruse all the different sections and look at it that way. Or you can come up over here to the menu, choose Railcar Movements, and this is going to show all locations and trains that have railcars located at them, which ones they are, where they're destined to go, and what their status currently is. Now this screen will update with real-time updates, so as operators are updating the screens on their respective tablets, those changes will show here. But as you can see, these are all the railcar movements that could happen in this particular session. Down here, we can see which ones are complete, which ones are incomplete, and which ones have a task that is not yet completed. So these particular ones at Grain Express are waiting to be unloaded. Once they are unloaded, then they will be complete. I'll return to that in just a moment so we can see how that works. But as you can see, this is a really quick way to see kind of a status at any given moment of how many rail cars have moved, are they in the right places, and how much time you have left before the session ends, and maybe how many more jobs you have left to do. Okay, another quick feature I'm going to show is, let's say, and this one's going to be useful for maybe yard duty. So if I look at my Kinnear Yard, which is right here, which is great, and let's say I go up to my Kinnear switcher and I'm working the yard. Now let's pretend there's a lot more rail cars here than that's shown, and maybe you want to know where those rail cars are going to go in the next session. So maybe you want to classify them on specific tracks, let's say. You can do that as well. You come up here to Menu, click Show Next Destination, and you'll notice that on every single car card and waybill, it'll show the current destination for this session and the next destination for the following session. So let's say you wanted to classify everything that's going to Grain Express in the next session on a particular track, so it's all ready to go. You can do that. And like I said, if you have a lot of cars and you just need to know how to classify them, this is a great little feature to do that. And you can turn that on and off at any time. And by clicking this, it's only going to be kind of per client. So if I have 10 tablets, and I could have 5 of those tablets showing the next destination and the other 5 not, it's all up to the preference of whoever's operating that tablet. Okay, so let's go back to those covered hoppers that are over at Grain Express where they are waiting to be unloaded. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to click Industrial Sector E. I can see I have a couple cars here. Now you'll see right here it says Start Unloading. Before I actually click one of those, I'm going to go back to the admin, head over to Waybills, find one of those cars. Now see the active waybill, its current destination is Grain Express. We can see it's currently at Grain Express. We know that by looking at the software and at the layout. Its task is to unload. Now, I can add a sense of realism and kind of slow the sessions down a little bit by utilizing this field here on my waybills called the lading timer. Now you enter a number in seconds, and once you click start unloading or start whatever the task is, it's going to take that amount of time for that task to be complete. And so this is just a way to add a little bit of realism, slow the sessions down so cars aren't being shoved around and kind of moved around too quickly. And it's just fun, and it adds a nice little element to the operation. So I'm going to come back over here to operate. I can see I have these cars here for this session. I want them to be unloaded. Now there's no particular person that has to do this. Me as a layout owner, I would be the one to actually initiate all these particular tasks, or you can designate them to other operators, however you see fit. But I would click start unloading, and this will start a timer. I'll click start unloading here. Now I set those to 300 seconds. So do the math, that's going to be 5 minutes later. And so as you can see, as the time ticks by, these task bars or progress bars will move all the way over. And once they're complete, they'll all receive this kind of green complete for that particular task. Okay, and now through the magic of video editing, these tasks are now completing after approximately 5 minutes later, and we'll watch them go over to complete. Now that these tasks are complete, I have a couple options for these particular rail cars. Now these cars were unloaded at the beginning of a session. And now if they are unloaded at the end of a session, you may not want to do anything else with them. You may say, okay, these are now complete and we're good to go. But since it was at the beginning of the session, I have a couple options. Now I could leave them like this and say, okay, for the rest of the session, these are complete. If you need to work this industry further, you're going to have to work around these cars. Or for this, since the train has not come yet and worked this industry, I could say, okay, now that they're complete, maybe I want to move them to the next destination or whatever the next waybill tells them to do. You can do that as well. Since it's complete, I can come up here, I can click on this little menu, and there's a bunch of different options in here. We can show the details. We can choose next waybill. Now, since this is complete, if I click next waybill, it'll show me where it needs to go next. And it removes the completion status because now it's not yet at its next destination. So its next destination is back to Kinnear Yard, and I'm simply going to relocate it there since it's now empty. A couple other options. I can go back to the previous waybill if that was a mistake. Now, if I do that, it also reset the timer. If I click this, I can wait again. Now, in the advent of a mistake, that can be overlooked. I can also actually come up here and say, okay, I actually want to reset this timer. Maybe it was a mistake that I actually hit unloading and I didn't want to do that yet. You can do that as well. And it also, you can see it reloads its last lading before that task had completed. The other thing you can do up here is you can also report a defect. So let's say as I click this, I'm looking at the layout and I say, hey, wait a minute, the coupler on that is busted. I can't actually connect onto that rail car anymore. So I can click report defect. I can come up here, and this is actually a great time to demonstrate this as well. I can say, hey, the coupler on the B end looks broken to me. Let's say replace coupler, or any other details I want to add in there. I click submit, and you'll notice that it takes it off of the UI. At this point, I would expect, hey, there's a defect with this rail car. I need to take it and place it somewhere so it can be fixed. So that's the idea here. And so what I can do now is I can come over to my admin, go over to manage. And you can see over here on defects, I have this little 1 here. It shows me how many defects are currently outstanding. So I can click defects and I can see, oh, this was reported on this date at this time. And it's this particular car. It's a covered hopper. And here's my description of what needs to occur. I need to replace the coupler because the coupler has an issue on the B end of the equipment. Now there's 2 actions I can do here. I can simply resolve it, and that will get rid of the defect. And basically it's a way of me saying, hey, I completed my task. I resolve the defect, but it's not going to place the car back into active status. It's going to keep it as basically disabled. And if it's disabled, it's not going to show up in any of the operations portion of the UI. I could also say, hey, that was actually a really quick replacement. I grabbed my screwdriver, I fixed it, I put in a new coupler, I'm good to go. I want to resolve this and set it back to active. So if I do that, you see it resolves this. I can go back to operate, and it places it right back in the UI where it was right as the defect occurred. So that's also an option for me as well. And at this point, I can say, okay, I'm going to start unloading and go through that right there. So if the task is not yet complete, another thing I want to show is I can click this and I could say, I actually want to go to the next waybill. Well, the task is not yet complete. Are you sure you want to do that? So this is just kind of prevent accidents from occurring and having railcars go to the next waybill that it shouldn't. So I'm just going to click OK, and I'm going to say, hey, for the rest of this session, this car now needs to go back to Kinnear Yard. Now I just talked about this particular menu here. It's also available in a couple other places. So if I were to click Show Details, you can see there's also a menu up here which has some options. And also if I click View All and I view all of the car cards and waybills for a particular location or train, those options are here as well. Okay, so let's check back in with our CN turn job and see where he's at. Alright, looks like he's just finishing up his tasks there, and he's going to head back power light to Kinnear Yard since there are no other rail cars at the interchange track to bring back. So let's head back over to the UI and let's go update this. Alright, so here we are, and we've got all of these cars that are now at their destination. So I'm just going to click Select All, and I'm already at Industrial Sector E. I'm going to come down to the CN interchange, and I can move them all here. And now these rail cars have completed their waybill statuses, and they're good to go for the rest of the session. Okay, so off camera, I went and I actually finished out switching out all of the jobs that I could fit in for my operating session on my layout. And I'm going to come back over here to the menu. I'm going to take a look at all railcar movements to see where I ended up at the end of my session. So this first one here was incomplete. We knew that was going to be the case because the interchange can only hold so many cars at a time. These ones are all complete. They're at their final destination. These are complete. These are not yet complete because they need to be loaded, but I'm going to worry about that at the start of next session. And the rest of them all are complete. So now what I can do is I can come over to my admin menu and I can click End Operating Session. And what this is going to do, it's going to ask me, okay, confirm if you want to process all completed waybills now or cancel if you want to process them later. And what this basically does is if I hit OK, every single waybill that's complete will cycle to the next waybill for that particular railcar. I want to do that at this time, so I'm going to click OK. And you can see here it completed the session. Here's the session time that it had started, when it ended, the duration, and how many of the tasks were completed of the total tasks for that particular session. So now if I come back over to Operate, I can see all my rail cars are now back to an incomplete status. And you can see right here, this one was incomplete for a number of sessions. As we could see, when it's incomplete during a current session, it won't show any numbers, but we could see here, okay, this has been incomplete for one whole operating session. It was not touched during that session. So this would be a priority car for me during the next session. I can also come up here to Menu, click All Railcar Movements, and I can see right here, these ones as well would be a priority for me at the start of the next session. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the admin section here, go to operating sessions. Now when I clicked End Operating Session, it asked me if I wanted to process all those waybills at that particular time. I clicked OK, and that cycled everything from its current waybill to whatever the next one should be for anything that has been complete. Now if I had clicked Cancel, the way to process them afterwards is to come down here and click Process All Waybills. And I may have some good reasons to do that. I may actually look at the data and say, you know, before I process everything, let me just take a look and see what was completed and what was not. And maybe I need to make some adjustments in my operating sessions. Maybe I need to lengthen them or shorten them, or maybe make some card movement adjustments for the next time around. But just know that you can come back here, click Process All Waybills, and it'll cycle all the waybills for you. All right, so there you have it. So that's an overview of how I use my software in conjunction with operating my layout. And all my other future layouts going forward are going to use this software. And I'm super happy with this. Digital car cards and waybills for me is just like, it's super fun. It really is. I've been having a lot of fun developing this over the past couple of years. This is like the third iteration of this, so I've really honed in on how I want my operations to go and how I want to operate my layouts, and this is just like the perfect companion for me. So I know there's other options out there, but there really wasn't anything that did exactly what I wanted to do. And so that's really why I took the time to research and figure out what I really wanted out of software with my layouts, and that's kind of why I came up for this. So with that, I did mention earlier that if there is enough interest, I'd be willing to make this as a free download so other people can check it out. The caveat there is that you kind of get what you pay for. It's free because it's just a personal project of mine. I'm willing to share it, but I'm not going to entertain everybody and their uncle's ideas for implementing features and things like that. If it works for you, that's great. If not, there's others out there, or you could write your own if you're up to it. So that's basically what I did. I don't know exactly when that will happen. I still have a few more things to do. It also depends on how much interest there is. So if you are interested and you would like to see this as some sort of download, let me know in the comments below. Again, I'm never going to charge for this, but the big caveat there is that I wrote this for me. The primary target audience for the software is me and my layouts. I'm simply willing to share it. I just don't have the time to implement features that everyone else thinks of. So, and the other thing is that I really wrote this because this is the way I want the software to operate for my layouts. So, it's basically, my little buddy. It's my companion. So, my ops buddy. All right. So, with that, I'm going to end this video here. I'll make a post in the future at some point, whether it's a video or some sort of community post on when that would be available and if there is enough interest. Let you guys know how that goes. The initial users would probably only be Mac users. I still have to figure out some Windows stuff. Software development is all about battling errors and going cross-platform. There's a bunch of errors. So I want to make sure that's available for both platforms. So initially it would just be Mac, but going forward I do intend on trying to figure out those Windows bugs. So anyway, that's it for this particular video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got some ideas of your own. And as always, thanks for watching. Take care. We'll see you next time.